Migrant workers around the world are leading the fight against COVID-19. They use their scientific and creative skills to transform the way we experience the pandemic. On this episode, let's hear the stories of two Filipino millennials who are doing inspiring work for the Philippines while they're based abroad. I'm Nicole Curato, and this is Meet the Millennials. Our first guest is a surgical nurse in the United States while also taking beautiful photos as a National Geographic explorer. One of her recent projects was to document her experience as a medical frontliner. Let's welcome to the show Rosem Morton. Hi, Rosem.
Hi, Nicole. How are you?
You have published a lot of thought-provoking pictures in many different platforms, but I think what caught our attention recently were the pictures you took during the pandemic. So tell us the stories behind the pictures.
So I started photographing my own journey as a nurse as the pandemic started to escalate. I did it kind of a journal style to show how it's slowly progressing and how it's getting worse and worse, and what it's like for us, how it's constantly changing at work. We didn't have enough PPEs, and how we're trying to just make the most out of the day-to-day.
Taking photos of your own experience as a surgical nurse, I guess, took a whole new level of meaning while you're taking it during the pandemic. Why do you think it's important to capture these images?
It's able to really show people kind of a live view of what's happening behind the scenes. Like, we see these statistics of people dying, but we don't really know what it's like. We see all the talk of no personal protective equipment, but you don't know what it's really like behind those scenes for the people who are actually working and trying to survive without them. So I think I was able to show what that really is like to get people to really care.
Of course, we hear a lot of stories of the trials of nurses during the pandemic, pero parang iba yung impact when it's a picture telling the story.
I think being able to photograph and really actively journal what was happening really helped me process that time too, especially when it was really most stressful, because we didn't know anything about it as much as we do now. People were dying and things were just changing super rapidly. That I was able to kind of step back and reflect and this is what's happening, and let myself kind of feel all of the emotions and see my hands that are this is what's happening right now.
And of course, when we talk about migrant workers, not just in the United States, but all around the world, there are many stereotypes associated to OFWs. So when we look at your pictures, what kinds of messages do you want to convey to the audiences?
We are not a one-dimensional group of people. I think we get lumped together as, oh, we're nurses, we're migrants, and in this larger conversation of immigrants taking people's jobs, and it's always on a negative light, but actually we are really contributing to the overall health of the world, especially because a lot of us are on the front lines in this pandemic right now. So I really wanted to highlight not just the work that Filipinos are doing, but also just them as individuals, as multi-dimensional people, to really expand on the stereotypes that have been placed on us. And it's my hope that people will find them relatable and find them to have something that's similar to themselves, so that they can care more. That we're not just a statistic, we're not just people who are dying, we're people who care about you, and hopefully you care about us too.
I love that point you made about migrant workers not having a single story, that there is a plurality of stories that we can celebrate and relate to. Rosem, your final message to our viewers.
Always challenge the stories that are out there about us and about us being Filipino, being migrants, us being nurses. I think there is so much about us as individuals and as a collective community. And I'm really just happy and proud to be contributing to this greater conversation.
Thank you so much, Rosem. You've contributed so much to the global conversation about the pandemic. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm so honored to be a guest here.
When we return, we speak to a Harvard scientist dedicating her skills to understanding the long-term health effects of COVID-19. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Meet the Millennials. Our next guest is a scientist at the Harvard Medical School specializing in pediatrics and infectious diseases. Let's learn more about her work in addressing COVID-19. Welcome to the show, Joann Diray-Arce. Joann, I was checking your Google Scholar profile a while ago. Super fangirling mode ako when I was looking at it. But I must admit that I find your work incredibly intimidating. So tell us what exactly you're working on, especially in relation to the pandemic.
Well, a lot of my colleagues, friends, and families are asking, when are we going to get the vaccine? And for me, who's working on vaccine research, I am involved in numerous vaccine design studies and also clinical studies that might be helpful, especially on targeting and eradicating the COVID-19. And also we are working with a lot of collaborators that are actively participating in numerous vaccine research, such as the one in Moderna, some in Pfizer, some in AstraZeneca, and a lot more, especially being able to work with NIAID. So for us, our eyes are all open also. We are really looking for the studies that will come out from the vaccine studies, especially on what I'm currently doing as my research is also just like what I mentioned, looking for those signatures that will inform us about the protection and the efficacy of these vaccines. And hopefully that is something that I will be able to share to others also in the future.
We often take for granted the importance of conducting scientific research in order for us to address this global pandemic. Why it's important for us to invest time and resources on research.
Especially right now, we are in a time crunch that a lot of people are dying, and we don't know. Like during the first quarter of the year, there are a lot of unknowns. And the only way that we can figure it out is through research. We have to gather data. We have to ask a lot of questions. And the only way for us to do that is similar to what we are currently doing, having clinical enrollments. We are learning more and backtracking. What do we know about the family of this virus? And also, what are possible mitigation, such as how can we prevent transmission? Is vaccine the best route to actually stop this pandemic? And also, what are the cures and the treatments that we can probably figure out?
Our research on infectious diseases and vaccine requires a lot of time and investment in education. What made you decide to go to this field?
I was very much interested with the questions of what is something that will help, especially that can not only affect the scientific community, but also your own family. So that's the reason why I actually went to immunology. And so I'm a mom myself. So it was a particular experience where during the time of my PhD, I was bringing my daughter during her to the hospital and to the clinic, actually getting her shots. And I do have particular questions that I need some answers. And that's when the opportunity just came up, and it just fit perfectly when I joined our group, which is the Precision Vaccines program here at Harvard.
And you are in one of the top universities in the world. You're based in Boston, and I'm sure you've heard some comments from people who say, why are you working in the US? Can't you do what you're doing in the Philippines? Why don't you serve our country? Do you think that's a fair statement to make?
While it is true that I'm doing research here in the US, the end goal of what I'm working on won't be confined in one place, but also globally, especially in the scientific community, where we are considered as a minority. So, although I am very much aware of the apparent circumstances that we do have in our own country, again, this doesn't mean never. And my end goal is to actually go back to the country and help in whatever capacity that I can do in the future, to be able to bring my skills and also train future scientists.
What kind of message would you like to impart to our viewers who may be inspired in doing scientific research as well?
Understanding more about what are we lacking in the Philippines? How can we help in some point of another? Whether it might be information that you can share with your families and friends. Our country is very good in social media, but it will be great if you are actually sharing information, reliable and legitimate information to everyone.
Wow, thank you, Joann. I know you're such a busy person, but you made time for us. Thank you for joining the program.
Thank you so much.
There's so much to be proud of about Filipino migrant workers transforming the way we experience the pandemic. For me, what makes me the most proud as a migrant worker myself is how we can challenge the feeling of resignation by drawing inspiration from the work of people like Rosem and Joann. Thank you for joining us in this episode of Meet the Millennials. I'm Nicole Carato. I'll see you again next time.
This episode of Meet the Millennials is presented to you by Sunmig Light. 100 calories lang, magaan sa tiyan.